scripture this afternoon is going to be in Philippians 4, 1 through 9. Philippians 4, 1 through 9. We're going to be reading from the Message version. My dear, dear friends, I love you so much. I do want the very best for you. You make me feel such joy. You fill me with such pride. Don't waver. Stay on track. Stay in God. I urge Euodia and blah, 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 to iron up the differences and make up. God doesn't want his children holding grudges. And oh yes, let's say Gus, since you're right there to help them work things out, do your best with them. These women worked for the Message hand in hand with Clement and me and with other veterans. Worked as hard as any of us. Remember their names are also in the book of life. Celebrate God all day, every day. I mean, revel in him. Make it as clear as you can to all you meet that you're on their side, working with them and not against them. Help them see that the Master is about to arrive. He could show up any minute. Don't fret or worry. Instead of worrying, pray. Let the petitions and praises shape your worries into prayers, letting God know your concerns. Before you know it, a sense of God's wholeness, everything coming together for good, will come and settle you down. It's wonderful what happens when Christ displaces worry at the center of your life. Summing it all up, friends, I'd say you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating on things true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best and not the worst, the beautiful and not the ugly, things to praise, not things to curse. Put into practice what you learned from me, what you heard and saw and realized. Do that, and God, who makes everything work together, will work you into his most excellent harmonies. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading and hearing of his word. Amen. Creator of all things, we trust that you are in this place with us. Send us a word that will renew us, that will open us up, that will help us to understand that you are a still speaking God, choosing to speak to us. These things we trust you for in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So the sermon is Trouble Don't Last Always. I have to laugh about this because I preach in 2 churches on Sunday, and there is a little bit of a cultural difference. And I sent in Trouble Don't Last Always, and I noticed in the bulletin it was corrected. Trouble will not last always. I was like, trouble will not, no, I meant don't. Like sometimes you just need the trouble don't last always. It doesn't have to be correct English. Trouble don't last, trouble will not, trouble don't last always. Trouble don't last always. This was a very interesting week. Very interesting week. Not that it was dissimilar in its interestingness from weeks before. But I found myself struggling with what would be a relevant word. What could possibly be a relevant word? The reason I struggled is because I thought, well, I could preach about wildfires in California and the hundreds of people who are displaced, and at this point, the death toll continues to raise. I could preach about how people have lost their homes, they've lost their livelihoods, and that I heard a story this morning of a 90-year-old woman who has lived in Northern California for her entire life and finally packed up a bag and is completely and permanently displaced in her 90s. That's a relevant word. I could talk to you about the fact that there's a man who signed a bill through an executive order that will limit some of our siblings from having insurance or the right coverage in their insurance, and will create a cataclysmic effect of insurance companies now fighting and warring with each other to eke out every single dollar they can from people who can't afford it. I thought maybe I could preach about the Attorney General of the United States, who has seen it as his God-given right, lowercase G-O-D, right, to make it law to make it legal to oppress people because of simply who God has created them to be. So I thought about all of those topics. I thought this would be a very depressing Sunday. And a very depressing Sunday. But it made sense to me in the understanding of trouble don't last always. Trouble don't last always. The context of our sermon, of the scripture today, is Paul is writing to the church at Philippi. And all of these letters, whether it's to Corinth or Ephesus or Thessalonians or whatever it is, Paul is writing. Now, if you were to think about why would he write a letter? He was writing a letter to reassure them of their faith, to recount some things that he had already taught them, but he was also addressing issues that had arisen in the church at that time. So we start this letter, we're in the 4th chapter, and we realize that 2 prominent women in the congregation are having a little bit of a problem with one another. And he's writing to remind them that though you're having this problem right now, I want you to remember all of the amazing work you 2 have done together to make this ministry even flourish. And then he has a note to the rest of the people in the congregation. Don't fixate on the fact that there's this spat between 2 of your sisters. Actually celebrate all of the amazing things that have happened as a result of their ministry. If you were to think on these things, then you can actually outweigh the many negative things that are happening. Do not allow the negativity to swallow you up. Now, it seems like this over a couple of thousand years ago church was having a similar situation that we're in right now. If we're not careful, we will spend every day of the week recounting and rehearsing every horrible thing that's happened in this country. We will recount every bill, every law, every misunderstanding, every disgusting tweet, everything. We could literally spend every single day rehearsing it. And in the midst of rehearsing all of those things, we miss the grandeur and the beauty of God. We rehearse the negative things so much and so loudly that even if God is breaking through with light, we will not see it because the darkness has covered. There is a truth in the midst of this struggle. There is a truth in the midst of this trouble, which is that God is still God. And the wonderful thing about God is that God is most manifest when we've deemed it is impossible for anything to be moved. Amen. God is most manifest, let me be clear, when we have deemed that there is no more room. Like, what could God possibly do? The laws are already in place. Things are already rolling back. Change is so rapid. You do not know from week to week whether or not you'll be able to stand still. Natural disaster after disaster, clearly, God must not be doing anything, or God is super quiet, or God decided all of a sudden in 2017 to take a nap. And we feel the weight of where is God? And I promise you, God is still moving. We just stopped talking about it. Yeah. We stopped celebrating it. We stopped lifting it up. We stopped sharing it with each other. We've become uncomfortable and a little bit shy to say anything positive that's happened because we told ourselves, how dare I celebrate in the midst of X? It's kind of like I had a premonition a few weeks ago that churches that are more fundamentalist in nature and every Sunday is about heaven or hell, if you really think about it, most of the sermons are actually about hell and about the devil. Now you think you're a church, but the whole worship is actually about Satan somehow. What Satan isn't going to do, how Satan is moving in your life, how Satan is going to do this. Satan is mentioned more times than God. And if you're not careful, some of our songs are satanic in nature. The devil did this, the devil stole this, the devil is moving like this, the devil is doing that. Where is God? And we've done the same thing now in our everyday life. Let me tell you what the enemy in the White House has done again. Let me tell you what this senator in this place has done. Let me tell you what the attorney general has done. We rehearse that. And in the middle of that, we forget that God is still healing. God is still lifting. God is still saving the lives of our neighbors and our friends and people all around. In the middle of this, I got a call from my grandmother that my uncle, his blood sugar was over 400 and something to the count last night, and he thought that he was going to get out of here, but he's still alive at this moment. And if I'm not careful, I will become so inundated by all of the negative things that I will forget that there's a God who shows up for your family in the midnight hour when you cannot. And can take over 400 and some count blood sugar and make it pliable enough that you can breathe through the night and still be alive on Sunday afternoon. If I'm not careful, I will forget about the movement of God. I will forget that God, as the old saints would say, stayed the hand of death all week and allowed us to be physically sitting in this place. I would forget that somebody this morning couldn't make it to church in Uganda and Kenya and Namibia and a bunch of other places because the local government has actually started raiding churches that are too inclusive in their gospel. And I was able to show up here in freedom. I can forget. Not that somehow God has chosen me over my sibling who's struggling, but I can be grateful. I have to hold them both. I have to hold that there literally is a problem every single day. And I have to hold that life is being birthed anew every single day. I think of it like anniversaries. Some of us have interesting anniversaries. Like the anniversary when Grandma died. So every December 20th, the dark cloud comes and nothing can ever be right for the rest of your life because Grandma died on December 20th. And we will tell people, listen, around the third week of December, just know that I'm not myself. I'm going to probably withdraw. I'm going to need to do this. We've set up the anniversary. We've set up how we're going to feel. We've set up how bad it will be. So what that means is that any positive thing that could possibly happen on the third week of December has no air. Because you've already determined that on the third week of December, there is no light. If we are not careful, we will create an anniversary of our entire lives. And it won't just last for the next 4 years, praise God, hope it's not. But it won't last for the next 4 years. Before we know it, it will set something in motion that will make us as a society more dark, more sad, more internal, more angry, more snap ready, more defensive, because we have allowed this darkness to become our reality. But I want to believe that God is bigger than the reality of where we were. The only story that I could think of today that really resonated with me was this interesting story of the woman with the issue of blood. This woman who suffered for over 12 years with an issue of blood. And it wasn't just a medical condition, but it was something that actually had spiritual and other implications based on the community in which she lived. So one of them was that because she was bleeding for 12 years, in her culture, she would have been deemed as unclean. Unclean, you're sick, you shouldn't be here, you are not a part of the community. So that's issue one. Secondarily, she was living in a time where she was going to be basically oppressed just because of her gender. Not like it's any different than today, but she was being oppressed basically because of her gender, okay? And then you could probably presume that maybe she was also poor. The scripture says that all of her earnings she paid on doctors who didn't know what they were talking about. Somehow, every context that this woman had would have suggested that she should have been laying outside of town, probably on a mat with a sheet over her head, because the darkness had told her in every single aspect there is no way. The story goes this: the woman heard that Jesus was passing through the town. She heard Jesus is passing through the town. She made a decision: I am going to triumph over the societal limitations of my gender, of my spiritual limitations of some worship center that told me that I was unclean, and of a societal structure that says as a woman, I should not approach this man to have a conversation. I don't know how long it took her to make that decision. I don't think it actually took very long. She heard Jesus is passing through, and no matter what, I am going to encounter this man. I actually believe not only am I going to encounter him, but something will be fundamentally changed if I can encounter this person. So the scripture, you have to unpack it. It says that she pressed through the crowd. And I want you to know, if there's a woman in ancient times pressing through a crowd by herself, there's probably a reason she has to press through. She had to make a decision that I will not allow your limitations to stop me. So if I need to press through the crowd, press through the negativity, press through the darkness, press through the oppression, press through anything that will prevent me from encountering Jesus, I am going to do it. What would happen, people of God, if we decided that irrespective of what I'm hearing, the noise, I am pressing through to the light? Because I need the light. The person in front of me and back of me, to my left and right, we all need the light. So I will do what is necessary to press through to the light. So that her trouble would not last always, because she made a decision that there was something about meeting Jesus that day. Yes. A faith walk. A faith walk through a crowd where the crowd was probably pushing her back. Saying, you don't deserve, you shouldn't be up here. Why are you doing this? People who probably, because of their own foolish limitations, jumped back when they saw her because she was unclean. And they didn't want to be unclean by interacting or touching her. This woman pressed through the crowd. Pressed through the crowd. And the scripture says she touched the edge of Jesus' garment. It's often translated that she touched the hem of his garment. But in truth, based on Jesus' socioeconomic status and where he was, she actually probably touched the frill on the bottom of somewhat of a tattered robe. There was no hem. It wasn't a perfectly wonderful garment. It wasn't sewed in the way. It was probably the frill. So I want you to get that. A hem is one thing. A hem is intact. It's solid. You know exactly what you're grabbing. A frill means that as soon as you touch it, it might slip through your fingers. You might not be able to hold on to it, but you're going to touch just the frill. People of God, yes, in this season, you may not see a clear hem. You may not see this beautiful garment that you can grab hold to, and you know that your fingers might dip into it and that God is there. You might be reaching for a frill. Yes. But I serve a God who can touch you even in the midst of a frill. Do you hear what I'm saying? Who can touch you even in the midst of it being tattered, even in the midst of it not being perfect. If you're willing to reach out to grab the frill, everything could be all right. And then I love Jesus' conversation with her. It's profound, and I want you to understand it. Your faith has made you whole. Jesus doesn't even take credit and say, well, I'm Jesus. Of course you touched me. I did that. Yes, I'm Jesus. He says, no, you did this. Your very faith, your very pressing, your very pushing, your very standing up for justice is what healed you. I am a conduit of the healing, but baby, you did this. Wow. You did it. We keep waiting. We're saying, well, where is God? God is not present, because we want God to step into our election and turn over things, and all of a sudden this voice says, you are not the president. We're like, oh, God is delivered. I mean, some of us have watched the Ten Commandments too many times. You know, we're waiting for the House of Representatives a seat apart, and people fly off to the edges, and Jesus all of a sudden shows up. But what if it's a frill? Wow. What if it's a tattered edge? And God is really saying change will happen when you touch the humanity in your sibling next to you. Change will happen when you stop looking at the person across the aisle like they are less than human and not a real person, because they haven't had the option to the freedom that you've had. Yes. When you stop thinking that somebody is less than you because of who they voted for. Because they don't share your mentality and they don't share your ideology. Maybe that's the frill. Maybe that's how we see God show up and change Congress, show up and change laws, show up, and our Facebook posts might be a little different. What if we believe that some of what's happening is just so that you can become more dark, so that you can become more scarce, so that you can become more sad and pulled away and isolated and afraid. Because when you do all of those things, then you do exactly what they hoped the woman with the blood would do. That she would get out of the way, that she would go bury herself, and she would go be unclean over there. And she said, not today. Jesus is always passing through your neighborhood, and through your heart, and through your mind, and through your spirit, and through your soul. And the only thing you have to do is grab hold. Even if it feels like it's a loose grab. For some of you, this sermon will be like, well, you knew what I've been through this week alone. And you're talking about find joy? Lord, come on. A frill. One little moment. One little moment of grace, of mercy, of peace. That reminds you that trouble will not last always. That you have the courage and the strength inside yourself to press until change happens. One person at a time. The beauty of a faith community is that, in truth, if I came at a quarter tank, that I'm supposed to encounter Trina, and maybe Trina has 3/4 a tank. Well, prayerfully, Trina's gonna pour a little bit in my tank, and I'm gonna pour a little bit in Trina's tank, and maybe she's not gonna leave full. She might leave at 60%, but I'm gonna leave at better than a quarter. Do you hear what I'm saying? Somewhere along the way, we bless each other, and then God knows somebody's gonna come in who's overflowing. And so maybe they meet Trina and I, and then they help fill us up the more, and then they meet the next person, and on and on and on, and we keep blessing each other over and over again because we're using what we have when we come together, but we will all be empty if we all come. Then there's no point of getting in your car and wasting your gas or your bus fare or however you got here, because you're going to come empty, and you're going to meet a bunch of empty people, and you're going to leave probably more dried out than you came. We don't have to be like that. We're going to do prayer requests and praise reports at some point in the service. And our tendency could be to celebrate everything that's horrible. Pray for this, pray for this, pray for this. Oops, I forgot. Also pray for this, pray for this. Oh, and this thing is going on. And I find at most churches, the joys and concerns are more concerns than joys. And if you watch strategically, the more concerns people share over time, the less and less joys you hear. I've teased some of you who have been blessed in the past few weeks. And it's like the joys come sometimes almost at the end. Like you're waiting to get, if you could have permission to say, yeah, I get the world is pretty dark, but the sun did shine. It's okay. Like, we're afraid to celebrate. Worship is a little bit harder in this season. Because you're like, how dare I? God, thank you. Like, what? No, it's just, do you know what's going on? So it becomes a little bit darker, and we have to press. We have to press in worship. We have to press in our day-to-day conversations with people. We have to press in life so that there is some form of joy. When we do it, we will see formative change. And again, maybe you won't think about it on the national level in the immediate, but you'll see it in your home. You'll see it when you go to work. You'll see it in generally how you feel. You'll see it in conversations with people. You'll see it in the responses on your Facebook posts and anything else. You will actually see light. And you will encourage people because of your choice to not stay in prison. Now, I'll end by saying this. I am not inviting you to be Pollyannish and to lie to yourself. To get up in the morning like, everything is great for me and everybody else. Like, why would anybody be worried? No, I'm not asking you to be Pollyannish. I'm asking you to hold both. The world is in trouble, and I'm pressing day by day to not let it swallow me up. I get people are super discouraged over here, so I'm going to do something that brings a level of positivity so that people know that they're loved, that they're seen, and that they're held. You can do both. At this church on Saturday, there are a group of people here preparing over 50 meals to be delivered to Compass Housing Alliance on Rainer Avenue. Over 50 plus people were waiting inside of a day center, not knowing that anything would happen for them that day, other than the bagels that were sitting there that some other organization had dropped off. And at some point on Saturday afternoon, over 50 people sat down, opened a container, and in it had a hot meal that was prepared with thoughtful care and love. There was a note of some kind that reminded them that they are seen, loved, held, important. They left that day center thinking, in the middle of the chilliness of the fact that winter has come to the Pacific Northwest, in the middle of the rain, in the middle of everything that could be wrong, I believe that when they stuck the fork in the plate, joy happened. You all did that. Not all of you in that particular Saturday, but you've done it by being a part of this church. You do it by your tithes and offerings. You do it by signing up on the sheet when it comes around. You do it by, I love that Cheryl always, it's almost like every Sunday, Cheryl brings a little 5-pound bag of rice with her to say, hey, here, I just want to make sure we ain't gonna never run out of rice, because Cheryl's making sure that we have that little bag of rice. But it's a thoughtfulness. She has no idea when that rice is going to be prepared or who it's actually going to feed, and she may never meet any of the people that it feeds, but she found joy in getting that bag of rice. And then somebody else is going to find joy as we struggle in the kitchen to boil 11 pounds of rice. Then somebody else is going to find it in seasoning and cutting up onions for the chicken, and then somebody else from pulling apart the rolls, and then somebody else from writing the notes, or something as simple as putting a label on side of the packaging of the food. Trouble won't last always, even if it's from the hours of 12 and 1 on one Saturday a month, and you know that 50 plus people are being fed because you gave up this time of your Saturday to sit at a table and fellowship with your church community and know that people are going to be blessed. My favorite question about the drop-in center was, is this something you guys want to do every month? Because if you do this, we will never turn you away. I won't forget that line. If you do this, we won't ever turn you away. We just want to know you're coming. Can you just let us know you're coming? We will not turn you away. No one will turn away light when it shows up. Yes. So this week I challenge you to ask yourself, in which way am I going to show light? How am I going to be the remedy to trouble don't last always? I can keep pretending that I'm waiting on Jesus, but supposedly Jesus was already alive in you. So I don't know what you're waiting on if Jesus is already alive. Jesus came. He did his work. He's waiting on us. Greater things should you do on the earth than I did. We forget that scripture. We're waiting on Jesus to do some other stuff. But Jesus said, actually, I did my part. Greater should you be doing. So, how will you bring joy? How will you bring joy? How will you bring light? How will you put an end to some trouble that you can actually put an end to? You can do it. It's tangible. It's possible. Last quick thing I'll say, even as I'm saying that, I think we think, okay, what big thing am I going to have to do that's going to be that joy moment and our minds start to run? When I was buying the chicken for Feed 50, the cashier says, oh, looks like you're about to have a big party. I said, well, kind of, but this is, our church and he's doing this. And he said, oh my God, man, that's so awesome. Thank you for doing that. Like, that means so much. You know what? It actually really reminds me of church growing up. I did that as a kid. My church did that. Wow. Thank you. I mean, it was, he didn't, that wasn't my invitation, like, well, come to Liberation, this is right up the street. But it was this moment that I realized in buying chicken at the grocery store and the cashier asking, it planted this memory. And he was like, oh, I remember that. He reconnected to something in his past that might elicit him maybe calling his parents and talking to them, or maybe if the situation is different, visiting that church again, I don't know. But it was simply standing in a line. So when you think about your joy this week, maybe it's not even something you have planned and architected and put it all together. Maybe you just showed up and someone extended a question and you answered and you reminded them of light in this world. God, we need to be light bearers. We need to be like the woman who presses through the crowd, irrespective of our own limitation, and touch the frill enough to allow ourselves to be blessed by you, through you, and with you. Give us the courage, oh God, to press through the negativity and the darkness and to be light. Light first within ourselves and then light within the lives that we touch. This week, God, we thank you in advance for the person that you are sending in our path that we might be light to. We may want to say, not me this week, God. But you said, yes, this week. Greater things will you do on the earth. In my name and through me. Greater things will you do. Give us our greater thing, God. Give us our invitation to be hope where people don't see hope. Light where they don't see light. Light. And joy where they only have sorrow. You can do it. We can do it. And we thank you in advance for the privilege to serve. Amen. Amen.